This is my first time in South Korea, so I think, for me, I've been in the crypto space almost 11 years, and I've spent a bunch of time in Europe. Obviously, I'm from North America, in the US. For me, I knew that the Korean market was huge, especially in the 2017, 2018 boom. The Korean market became one of the biggest markets in crypto. And so for me, I wanted to come out and see it for myself. So far, it's as big as I thought it was going to be. But I've only been here for a couple of days, so I'm excited to explore more. Yeah, so Bitcoin's always been a settlement network. Even in the early days, Hal Finney looked at Bitcoin. So Hal Finney was the first person to ever receive a Bitcoin transaction. He hypothesized that people wouldn't transact on Bitcoin layer 1, but they would use Bitcoin banks, as he called them, or layer 2s to be able to transact Bitcoin cheaply. So, Bitcoin, the payments use case, I think, was a misguided narrative from the 2013 era. And we've definitely seen, I think, people come to realize, no, Bitcoin's a gold 2.0 settlement mechanism for large value transactions. That can also include, for example, ordinals on top of Bitcoin, which could be very valuable NFTs. Let's say the NFT costs $1,000. Bitcoin L1, like any other blockchain L1, should not be used for super cheap everyday payments, just because that means your block size has to be larger. Larger block size reduces the number of nodes and reduces decentralization. So, Bitcoin L1 versus L2, or like what people should use, is totally subjective relative to the market. I'm not here to dictate what use cases people use Bitcoin for. Bitcoin will be used by users of the network for reasons that will solve a problem for them. Bitcoin L2 and which L2 might win out, I'm not exactly sure, whether that's like side chains like Liquid, Rootstock, Lightning, which is state channels, Stacks, which is kind of like a gas token. All of these things are different ways to approach Bitcoin's scaling issue, which all blockchains have scaling issues. So I'm not really set on one being the one size fit all. I think there'll be a variety of different solutions. Yeah, so hyperbitcoinization first has to be defined, and it's hard to define hyperbitcoinization because no one's really fully defined what that means. Does that mean 50% of the population owns Bitcoin? Does it mean 100%? Does it mean that 100% of the population owns Bitcoin and is spending it? I think the narrative that makes most sense to me is that Bitcoin is a world reserve currency akin to gold. That would be hyperbitcoinization, where a very high percentage of the population, I would say over 50% of Western developed countries, and maybe Asia as well, maybe over 50% of them, of the population owns Bitcoin as a savings mechanism. That's hyperbitcoinization to me. A gold 2.0-esque status. I think Bitcoin is wildly successful if it hits that. Now, some proponents of hyperbitcoinization say that Bitcoin becomes everything, the all-encompassing money. I hope that happens, but I think that's a little bit optimistic, where Bitcoin becomes like everything's priced in sats. Bitcoin's used for everyday transactions, for everything. I think that might be the era that we hit. I think it'll take a very long time. It'll take maybe like a generation. But I do think hyperbitcoinization to me it hits a gold 2.0-esque status. And yeah, ZK rollups I think are going to be a really big scaling solution for both Bitcoin and Ethereum and other chains. I think we have decentralization, going back to the core underpinning of why Bitcoin and blockchain tech is important, is that blockchain tech was built to build Bitcoin. And it was built in a way on the Bitcoin network to be the most robust and decentralized as possible. So I think we see with government level attacks, like the SEC attacking different protocols, I think we'll see a renewed emphasis on decentralization and how to remain decentralized and how to resist government level attacks. As these protocols become more and more successful, they're going to encounter more and more resistance from the status quo, the big governments and banks. So it'll become, I think, an increasingly more important topic. Whereas before, when the industry was small and no one cared, decentralization didn't matter as much. Not that many, almost no governments were attacking it. Third biggest trend I would say is more around user experience. I think in the 17 to 18, 19 cycle, we still had a relatively small pool of talent, UX, UI designers, VC capital. And in the 2021 bull market, we finally saw, I think, a big number of really incredible product designers, user experience designers come in and reshape and kind of create GUIs that are more usable for the layperson. I think those will only get better because right now private key management is still really tricky. And so I think user experience is still kind of that, it's always a persistent frontier, but I think that's the one that needs to be solved the most. Well, I mean, if AI is as successful as proponents think it will be, which of course it will be someday, I just don't know if ChatGPT-3 or some of the LLMs, I don't know if that will be the AI that really pushes it forward. I could see that helping out some things like code review. For example, a more sophisticated artificial intelligence could parse through blockchain code and identify zero-day exploits and identify those, and that would help the developers patch it before it becomes an issue. So that could be really interesting. But AI, I think, will impact a lot of different things. I don't think it will have more or less of an impact on the crypto industry, more so than any other industry.